Welcome everyone. I think we'll start with in a usual manner with karakia if you're able to help us out there, Thompson.
Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Just acknowledging that we had an opening karakia this morning, so this will be just supplementary to that karakia to shift us into another space. So whitirere ki te ao te tihi o te rangi, whitirere ki te ao te taha o te rā, e o matawai uhi uhi mai, tauti mai rā, whiti eke, kau te mauri, haumi e, hui e,
Tā ie.
Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, thank you. Committee, we've got in front of us today a relatively straightforward agenda, and I hope everyone's got their packs or are able to access those on Stella. The first thing we'll do is ask for any apologies, and I just wondered whether there are any.
Will Foley?
Councillor Foley, is Councillor Rodley online or?
Not yet.
Chair? Well, she won't be far away, I'm sure. So we'll just hold that over and just record the one apology for the moment,
Scroll up.
and that being Councillor Foley. Can I have a mover to receive that apology, please? Thank you, Councillor Harding and Councillor McIntosh. Thank you. All those in favour of receiving that apology will say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Just by way of welcome, this is the first Corporate and Strategic Committee of the new triennium, and what a start we've had. We've included in this agenda is the terms of reference for the committee, which we'll get to shortly. But it's easy to say that our triennium will not be a usual triennium in any stretch, and we've got a lot to do there. With this committee has a great deal of work to do in regard to administering the affairs of the council, particularly in regard to looking after its finances, and all of those equations which we would have expected pre-cyclone have changed. So we have a lot to do. Just going to the agenda, if we can look at the conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts for people to declare? There being none. Are there any minor items that anyone wishes to put on the agenda to notify at this stage? Councillor Williams.
Investment partnerships.
Investment partnerships.
Investment partnerships.
Are there any other items, minor items? No. We'll go to our first decision item, which is agenda item 4 on the in the agenda, and that being the terms of reference, strategic terms of reference. I hope people have had a chance to look at those. I've got some additions myself, but who's going to take us through this one? Leon, is that your territory or someone else? Peter?
The paper author was Desi, and Beckett will be Katrina in terms of item 4.
Do you want to come forward, Desiree?
Through you, Chair, we could just have the item taken as read, and then any questions or suggestions for changes, we can go through those as you wish.
Is that okay, Desi?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So any comment on these terms of reference, or is there a change from previous years?
Morning, councillors, and through you, Chair. The terms of reference are based on the terms from the previous triennium, so very similar. So nothing new to report there.
Yes, and then through you, Chair, there are a few minor changes which were with the changes to the terms of reference for the risk and audit. so that the Corporate and Strategic Committee now covers the financial part of that, rather than what used to be the Finance, Audit and Risk is now just the Risk and Audit Subcommittee.
Thank you. Are there any questions or issues that you'd want to see on that terms of reference? Councillor Sears? No? I have a couple, and I'm suggesting that it's 1.3, monitoring the effectiveness of Council's strategic external partnerships with the region's territorial local authorities. And I'm suggesting we add in there and agencies funded by Council, including Hawke's Bay Tourism, Matariki, and I'm not sure about this one, but I've included in my note, the Future Farming Trust. So we've got a number of agencies that we fund. They're not specifically mentioned elsewhere, and I wonder, given the scope of the recommendations here, the recommended actions here, we include them deliberately. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. I would just, at Future Farming Trust, I understand we no longer fund, and they have in the past reported to
the Environment
EICC.
Committee.
Yes. So the other ones, they are funded through our regional development rate. So that would make sense to cluster those together, but perhaps Future Farming Trust, that would be the odd one out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I wasn't quite clear on that one. Are there any other agencies that we fund that need to be referenced?
Biodiversity, Hawke's Bay, are we still funding? No, that's ended.
The only contribution we do make is to the Regional Economic Development Agency by way of portion of with other TAs. However, given the separate board and governance structure, I'm not sure whether or not it's appropriate to come through here. But
Would
only
it
as
not be
matters
equivalent
arise.
to Hawke's Bay Tourism?
Yeah,
And they've got a
that's-
similar governance structure. It's essentially a
As and when
reporting
required.
portal for, so do you think included or not?
Can I ask a question?
Councillor Sears?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So where has Hawke's Bay Tourism traditionally reported? Straight back
Through.
to full council, or
No, through corporate
it
strategy.
already has?
Yes.
It just wasn't directly. Okay, thank you. Yep. Referenced.
So
Can I
included?
come back to you on the reader element, just whether or not we include that, or if we, as and when required?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's if everyone's in agreement, add agencies funded by council, including Hawke's Bay Tourism and Matariki, and yet to be confirmed whether we throw in the reds as well. Remembering we've got this opportunity to, this is a recommendation to council, and there's a little space of time to consider another option if we need to. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to endorse the suggestion. I think it's only appropriate that there's clarity about which organisation, all organisations that we make a financial contribution to do get scrutinised at some level. I'm not sure whether the level of scrutiny will be equal for the different organisations. I don't have a good feel for that at the moment, but to have clarity of oversight. And so the wording that you used is inclusive. So it's not, and you've chosen to identify a couple of organisations, but it's inclusive of all of those that we have a financial interest in, and that's fantastic. I do have, once we move from that, I do have a suggestion for another, just in terms of clarity around the financial accounting, another suggested addition.
Do you want to make that suggestion now?
Yep. So I'd say a new 1.3 before your new 1.3, which will become a 1.4, simply oversight of council's financial reporting. So that's just, I couldn't read anywhere else with clarity that the regular financial, management and audit accounts come through this committee. And just hope that. So oversight of council's financial reporting would be my suggestion.
That's an easy one to put in, I would have thought. I've got an additional suggestion. I'm calling it 1.9, and it follows on from 1.5, which is monitoring corporate services, 1.6, resource consent and compliance, 1.7, people and capability, the investment portfolio, and I'm suggesting monitoring the effectiveness of Council's emergency management group of activities. So it's looking at those groups and
In the context of financial,
well, we have a CEDM report
Yes.
from time to time, but it hasn't got a home in another committee. So I'm suggesting we explicitly note it in the terms of reference. Councillor Williams.
Just a thought about that. To me, that sounds more like a full council job. And I appreciate we often double debate things, but I don't know that we monitor any other sub-entity or subcommittee of this council through another subcommittee, through a committee. So something about that strikes me as failing the Sesame Street test.
Well, just for clarity.
I don't dispute that we shouldn't have oversight over civil defence. Don't get me wrong.
This is not the CEDM.
Right.
This is our own emergency management inputs.
Oh,
So
I
we've
see.
got our own regional council, a group, which has its own outputs, and you'll see that in the planning documents.
So I can add something maybe to will help with that. So in the long-term plan, we do split the emergency management group of activity into two activities. One is the group and one is HBRC's emergency management.
see.
And that is like our business continuity and having
Okay.
trained capability and capacity to manage our own IMT and EOC.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's just consistent with what else.
On that basis, I understand. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that.
So if everyone's comfortable with those additions, if there are not any more, can we include those in the next draft to come to council? In that case, it might be best if I moved the adoption of the terms of reference. And I seconded Councillor Harding. Were you seconding that?
So, just a point of order there, Mr. Chair, is the motion you're going to pass is that you're moving that this committee recommend
To council.
that the terms of reference be
Adopted,
approved
yeah.
on with those changes.
Well, I'll go to the recommendations themselves. Receives and considers the report, confirms the terms of reference for the committee as adopted by the Regional Council on 16th of November. Confirms, so we've already tabled those.
Yeah, that's where I was a little bit stuck.
Okay,
So
you're
we
right.
need to move, presumably, it
Yeah.
may be recommended for change on the basis discussed, something like that.
Yep. And then there's a fourth recommendation there, confirms the appointment of Peter Eden to represent the Māori Committee in Kiri Raupaha, and my apologies for not acknowledging you when we commenced, representing the Regional Planning Committee. So there are in fact four recommendations there, which I'll move all four, seconded by Councillor Harding. Any issues with that from around the table? Councillor Harding.
Yeah, just for the sake of absolute clarity, so the recommendation 3 is the one that we've just discussed, which is the amended, we're recommending an amended set of terms of reference. Yeah, just being clear there that it's where we've landed.
Any comment on those recommendations? There being none, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. Now, I did omit one introduction along with Kiri's earlier, was our new governance administrator.
Advisor.
Can you help us there? This is
Everybody, this is Alison Doak, and she joined us on Monday as our new governance advisor in our team. So
welcome
excited
aboard.
to have
Yeah.
her.
Can you give us about 20 minutes of your life? So welcome aboard. Come along for the ride. We'll now move to agenda item 5, which is the quarterly treasury report for the September-December 2022 period. And I'm assuming that's you.
Yes, and we've got Jess Bennett, who's our Treasury Accountant, with us as well. Can I just open up a couple of words from me? So the report that's in front of you is as at the quarter to 31st of December. We have, in the last month, had a number of council meetings where we have presented financial updates as a result of the response. So what you're seeing here is obviously pre-cyclone numbers, which will obviously in due course drastically change the next time you see those through this committee, just in terms of our debt and our cash flow numbers. I'll hand over to Jess just to highlight a couple of things in the paper just to be aware of that you can see.
Yeah, so the main purpose of this paper is just to provide monitoring against our Treasury policy and the compliance of that. So the main things to note is just our investment fund portfolios in terms of their total capital value is currently, initially what we put in was 152.2 million. And essentially the adjusted, inflation adjusted amount since inception is considerably higher, and we're below that amount. So we're behind target of $16.6 million. The other key things are we received a dividend of $5 million from the investment company in December, and that was on the back of a Napier Port dividend made to the investment company in December. No other divestments have been made from the managed funds, and the market continues to be volatile, like we've seen for the last 6 to 12 months in particular. So I'll take the rest as read and invite any questions.
I wonder if I can get you, though, just to give us a synopsis of the portfolio itself, where it's held. We've got some little confusion about HBRC and how that's comprised. So this is a report that covers all of that investment.
It does, yeah. Yeah, so do you want me to comment on it?
Sure.
So our report that comes from PwC, which is this one here, which is the appendix to item 5 paper, covers all of the funds that sit within Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the investment company. So in total, we've got the 152 million of managed funds, and they are spread across essentially 6 various portfolios. Within council, we have a future investment fund and a long-term investment fund, and those amounts are divided between our 2 fund managers, Mercer and Jarden. So essentially we have 4 different managed portfolios under council, and under the investment company we have 2, one under Jarden and one under Mercer as well.
Technically, on the face of these portfolios, you shouldn't really see any difference in the managed funds because they're all operating under the same SIPO. However, what you do see is slight tweaks in them in terms of their returns, which are highlighted on different pages in that Treasury report. But they should somewhat be performing at the same outcomes.
Right, let's open up for questions. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, my Stella's decided not to behave itself at the moment, so I can't annotate any longer since the upgrade, so I'm struggling with my fingers here. But generally, the point 2 of the paper notes that the council was compliant with all measures in its Treasury policy. However, point 8 notes that the Treasury policy requires a quarterly Treasury report to go to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, which I'm fairly confident hasn't happened. So I just, and I suspect, so there's a slight inconsistency there, or might not be, because it might just be around the timing, the 31st December timing. But I guess my key point is that there are a number of matters of detail which I, in my capacity in my financial capacity, would like to have the chance to go through in terms of formatting of reports and some questions of things that we might be able to make more clear to the average reader. We haven't had a chance to do this. I hope that the process, that when we get back into a business as usual kind of process, we will have that chance for these reports to go through audit and risk first.
So those reports that are listed there, then, they're actually, all of those things are mostly covered within this? So they're reports within the overall report? Is that what you're asking?
No,
or are you
no,
asking
my
for
making the point
separate
is that this is the first, I think that this report, the first time we've seen, council laws have seen that report. My understanding is that the processes that it ought to have come through the subcommittee first hasn't, I presume we just simply haven't had a chance to do this because of the cyclone. I'd like to see normal business resumed as soon as possible so we can get down and deal with and produce more quality in the reports that come.
Sure.
Here.
You're exactly right. Normally we go through FAR first and up through to the CNS. In this case, what's happened this year, we've got it the other way around for the first one. So you are right.
All right. Any other points that people want to pose questions around? Gosh, we're getting away lightly here. Might be the next quarter.
I do think the council, and as I said, in recent meetings with council, the whole council has been through the investment strategy review. We've spoken at length about what's happening with debt and the cyclone. So if I'm honest, this is a point in time. You're all well aware of what's happening on our cyclone response. So.
It's not due to lack of interest,
Yes,
Chair,
correct.
due to understanding the realities of the
Yeah.
current versus historic position.
Yes,
How
I
much
think you're
attention
right.
we should pay.
Yes, and I think next report will be much more vigorously examined, I would have thought.
And may have bigger numbers.
All right, on that basis, can I have a mover to receive the report?
I'll shut mine down.
So what's the precise wording for our recommendation? Receives and notes the Treasury report. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Williams, second. You want to wish to speak, councillors? No? Good. Well, I'll put the recommendation to receive that. Thanks so much, Jess. All those in favour of receiving and noting the report will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. So that's carried. We move now to agenda item 6, which is the financial report for the 6-month period up to the 31st of December. And Chris, you're going to run us through this?
Yep.
Any introductory comments from Susie?
No.
Again, this will be subject to substantial change next time round.
Yeah. So as Susie said, for the Treasury report, this is to the Q2 to the 31st of December. And obviously there's been quite a bit of impact since that point. At that period for the first 2 quarters, we were slightly below budget in our operating expenditure, some of which is related to timing differences around some of our environment erosion control scheme work. Income was slightly ahead of budget. Some of those again is around the environmental infringement and enforcement proceeds that we're working on a paper to actually say whether they should, how they can be put into a reserve to carry forward to actually deal with activities that were that the prosecution said that these should be actually put towards rather than into just general funds. Capital expenditure is was significantly behind budget at that point at the end of the first 2 quarters, and of course, as you just said, investment income was quite well down at that point in time. I would make one note that you will see some financial numbers in the operational performance report that will be coming later in here. Those numbers will be slightly different to some of the numbers in this report. The Q2 financial report, we put in depreciation and overheads, which weren't included in the operational performance report, because that was kept at those pure costs that those managers have influence over. And at that point in time, we did the numbers for the operational performance report. We hadn't run depreciation and the overheads at that point in time. So that is the reason for any discrepancies between the 2 reports.
Can I just pick you up on that, because there's a question I had. So these, if you go to point 10 in your background there, in the first page of the paper, property, plant and equipment, fixed assets were imported to Tech One in January. So are they occurring in this report or not?
Yes, they are included in this report.
Even though it's to the 31st of December?
Yes, so we imported them into the new Tech One system. So for fixed assets, we had all of our fixed assets previously in Navish in our previous financial system. We were running depreciation in that system and then journaling it into Tech One. We have progressed work on Tech One to get the fixed asset register up and running. We imported all of the assets into Tech One during January and then ran the depreciation for the first 6 months of the year in Tech One.
So does the system-driven depreciation algorithm, where does that land us in terms of values?
In terms of...
So we've got a systems-driven approach.
Well, it's Tech One driven,
Yes.
as opposed to Navish, our previous financial system driven.
Is there a difference?
No. There's a slight tidy up in some of the categorisation of assets, because in the transfer we've ensured that the categorisation of assets is accurate in there. So some of when you drill down into the level of detail of actuals against budgets for particular classes of assets, there's a slight movement that is required in the budgets now. But in the overall position, there was no impact in terms of what we were running as depreciation previously in our vision to what we're running in Tech One.
Good, thank you. That's it from you?
Yep, that's it for me.
Right, now, the 15 questions. Who's got one?
I won't go first though. Let someone else speak.
Is there a question on the financial report? So straight to you, Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I simply observed that I got to the end of this item and said, well, okay, so this is a summary of the financials. Where are the financials? And don't appear to be any financials. I just find that unusual in the broader financial context. And I do find it extraordinary that we would be considering a paper summarising our financial position without actually having the financials. And that may be the way that the local authority sector operates, but it's probably not, it's less than ideal from my point of view.
I can answer that. So as you've heard, we're moving to Tech One system. So currently at the moment, to produce monthly management accounts, there is considerable manual reporting required to make that work. At the moment, Tech One simply cannot produce quarterly without manualising that process. So what you're seeing here and what has happened since Tech One implementation happened is a summarised version of financials. So this will continue up until such time as we can produce what is required at a more detailed level for you.
Could I just add to that? There are some things, for example, the allocation of rates across all of the groups of activities and work streams and working through reserves that only happen at the end of the financial year as well. So preparing full financial statements to align to an annual plan or annual report, we don't do it and never have done at the moment. One of our hopes with Tech One and as we work forward is that we can start bringing some of those annual allocations onto a more half-yearly, quarterly, ultimately monthly basis so that we can actually produce a proper full set of financial statements. But it's just not possible at the moment because of some of those annual allocations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The main reason for making this point is to exercise my judgment, my professional judgment on these accounts, or on the financial situation and the financial position of the council without a set of accounts is actually quite extraordinary. So I very much hope that we evolve our systems to a point where actually that what would be a normal discipline can actually apply in this organisation.
Completely agree.
Yeah. You make a good point, Councillor. We're just in this interregnum period with migrating to Tech One, and it's we all get there eventually. It's Tech One is
I think, yeah, unfortunately, with the cyclone, sorry, through you, Chair, we had the reporting cycle for June in preparation to be able to do them at June, but that's now significantly delayed just around prioritisation of that project. And at this stage, I don't have a date for when we're going to be able to get them.
It's just the way it is. Good. Any other questions around this? Possibly just got one myself, and that's at point 27.1, and it's to do with the vehicle cost, 400k overrun on vehicle budget. Is that reflecting the type of vehicle we're buying? Is it the utilities that have gone up big time, or what? Where are we?
So I think, for example, that Marcus pulls out is the most efficient ute on the market in terms of the economy. That is a Ranger, which is probably one of the more expensive ones. So in going down a route of ensuring that we are as eco-friendly as possible, and that does cause slightly more cost.
There has been, as a number of you will realise, in the agricultural space, a significant shortage of utes in New Zealand, and the cost to replace those utes is higher. However, that does offset in some cases where we get where we sell the second-hand ute. We're also getting greater income on the second-hand ute sales or trade-ins. So there is a slight offset. Just for way of background, going forward, the team have done a vehicle fleet review at the end of last year. We will look to implement those recommendations going forward. That includes such things as not replacing our vehicles. Currently, we replace them on a 3-year cycle or a 200,000 kilometre thingy. We are looking at how we can extend that to both save money and environmental benefits as well. So that may change significantly as we go forward.
Thank you, Susie. In the absence of any other questions, can I have a mover to receive the report? Is that you, Councillor Sears? And Councillor Ormsby seconded. Do you wish to speak, councillors? I'll put the recommendation, that is to receive the financial report for 31st of December. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Those against will say no. That's carried. So we're getting along at pace. Hopefully we can finish by 12:30. We get to item 7, which is the organisational performance report, and we do have the benefit of the report and the attachments. Who have we got? Sarah and Anissa. Hadisa. Sarah and Hadisa. Harisa, my apologies.
Yeah. So Harisa Adlan joined the company. I've joined HPRC, was it in November last year? So she's our performance and data analyst as well. So she's providing much useful technical support to the performance team as well.
Great, and you get 20 minutes as well. Let's go.
Kia ora. I'll take the paper as read. However, I'll just point out some points of interest. I certainly chose the right quarter to introduce the financial results into the quarterly report, given we had a much shorter time to complete it. For those councillors that were here 18 months ago, you may remember that we used to have our financial activity commentary under our activity reporting. Tech One took that ability away for a short time, but we're happy that they're back in there. With a little bit more detail, we have broken down the expenditure into OPEX and CAPEX. And then we have another line for other revenue, which includes things like fees and charges, grants and proceeds from other income. But that's an OPEX and CAPEX value combined. So most of them are either or, but there are a few that are OPEX and CAPEX. And because we have a new council, I've actually presented the levels of service measure in full rather than by exception. Normally we'd only put the amber and red in there, but just so you've got a good view of our 58 level of service measures and how we're tracking throughout the year, I thought it'd be useful for this year particularly, and we can carry it on if you like, to have that in there. There are some gaps in the reporting. It was just very unfortunate with the timing that the closing date for the reporting was the day of the cyclone. So we had a lot of staff already being redeployed, and it just wasn't possible to get that commentary in there. However, I have worked with the finance team to get some commentary on the financial side of the activity. So that has been completed as well. I'll leave it there, and if there's any questions, luckily I've got the general managers here to answer any particular questions in their areas of field.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, and well done for getting that report to us in such demanding circumstances. And it is a really good report. Can you just tell us the online, or the ability to access this online?
Yes, yeah. So we have Power BI that should be loaded on your iPads. So all of this information is on our Power BI dashboard, which is set out as a report. So you have access to all of that information. Plus, if you want to go a bit further back into our what we call our cost centre reporting, which is that next level down from activity, there's a lot more detail in there that often gets missed in the report as well. Also that's on the dashboard is our strategic projects as well that you get monthly. So we have the latest report of our key strategic projects. These are the ones that our top 10 that we keep an eye on as well. So they're in the dashboard as well. So it's kind of like a one place to go for all of this information. So if anyone has any problems getting onto that, I can work offline with any councillors that does want to view it and doesn't seem to have access to it. The instructions are in the paper, so should be fairly straightforward.
Can I ask, sorry, Kiri, please.
I just have a question with that. Do I need to have access to that given I'm not a councillor?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't have one of your iPads, I have my own laptop, so is that something that I need to?
It's linked in with the HBRC email address, I understand. So if you don't have an HBR email address, that affects you need a license to. We've had that question before. Leanne, have you got an answer? Sorry.
Yes, and we will organise that for you,
Okay,
Kerry.
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, have you had a chance to look in there, look at this site? It's really worthwhile to have a good old scrummage around there. There's some great information, good graphics. It's a little bit almost interactive, isn't it? You get a much better view than the hard copy, that's for sure.
Yeah, you can see the actual points, the data points if you use it. It's you can hover your mouse or your cursor over and get actually further detail. So we do keep that as up to date as possible.
So, questions on this, Councillor McIntosh?
Yes, investigating that site might answer this question, but on page 8 where we refer to health and safety, I don't get a feel there of really bad stuff that may have happened or may fit into the near miss category. And I'm thinking particularly near miss where it could be a narrow avoidance of a catastrophic thing. And so how would that be reported? Would that normally come via the commentary with us if something like that happened?
Susie, have you got a view on the health and safety? We've just present the very top level as it is in HAZMATE.
So health and safety is, in terms of incidents and risks, would come through the FAR committee as part of the, is that what am I answering your questions?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll give you an example. So where I worked previously, we had a big canoe polo pond, right? And if a young kid walked in there unnoticed and there was no one in there, that would be recorded as a near miss. Could have been absolutely catastrophic if the kid had fallen in, because and so it's that sort of thing that I'm talking about, where there's something happened. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We have a health and safety team here at HBRC, Kirsty McGuinness, and so every time there's a near miss or incident or anything of the kind, there is a health and safety form that's filed, and that gets escalated through to both group manager and petty in instances we required, as well as the manager. We have to have an action plan in place with a due date, and that gets tracked that way, with the numbers coming back up through the FAR committee in due course.
Yeah, look, I sort of understand that.
Sorry,
I was
John.
just meaning that I don't get a sense of that in reading this, and hopefully that's just because actually nothing really bad happened, but I just want to be confident that if something did, then that's going to come through here.
It should. I'm not aware of anything bad to put you at ease in the last quarter, so, but if there was, you would get a sense prior to this report. Prior to this report, Jock, you would know about it.
Through you, Jack, I can just point out the corrective actions that we took on some of the public incidents that were that came through from the My Way calls as well. And there's a little bit in there about what came out of that as in terms of a public incident. We don't normally put them in, but it was just that we felt that was big enough. There was a number of them that we thought would highlighted in the report as well.
Okay, well, I think so. That's an example, albeit a reasonably mild one, of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Very good question, Councillor. We'll come back to that. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Look, and my question is directly segueing from what's just been discussed. Public incidents of note were regarding My Way calls, internal investigation, police were informed. Can you unpack the word public incident and give me a scenario that might be one of those?
Public,
My Way content?
yeah, public incident is a category that health and safety use with an interaction with the public. So the public incident is the category of that type of.
Sure.
I can give you a number of incidents in relation to those. So the CX team are receiving a number of direct calls from My Way callers abusing our staff. They know the names of our staff and they know the cell phone number of the staff. So they've circumvented the contact centre number. We've treated that as a health and safety incident, and we also get people walking through the front door to the counter abusing our staff for transport related queries. And just so you know, actually we're now starting to this week get quite aggressive front of house silt customers and or rates or things like that. So that's the sort of
Those would be
incident.
public incidents.
Correct, that's a public incident.
Can you give me an example of what these people in these public incidents are aggrieved about?
My Way in particular, bus hasn't arrived. Where's my bus? When can I get? Yeah, Katrina can probably answer more, but it's generally
Just
can't
please,
access.
just paint me a little bit of a picture.
So My Way. Not really able to hear you.
Largely about My Way, if we're talking just My Way. It was mainly when we had a shortage of bus drivers, and so we weren't able to log them. We weren't able to take their booking because the wait time was exceeding that we could log them. So they would then have to ring back. But of course that creates an issue, as you know, with the way My Way works. But it's not only in addition, only My Way, it's also about the public transport. So Susie's right, the bus isn't here, where's the bus? And people just getting really aggro at our staff.
All the cancellations, the driver shortage on My Way, just sort of people getting frustrated with that, revealing itself as what we define as a public incident is the situation?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question, Chair. There's a sea of red in the organisational performance report in the financial metrics, but the sea of red is in fact a sea of black because there are 90% underspends. The question I've got, which may be impossible to answer, is does that fact of underspend, which has been for a whole bunch of reasons around procurement or weather or whatever it might be, actually fortuitously, is there a silver lining in having placed the organisation now in a more resilient position to withstand some of the many overspends we've now got, or is it irrelevant?
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with what your statement is saying. In a number of instances, however, though, we do have committed
So it has to be spent in
commitments and have to be spent on certain programs, whether that's ICM, asset management, etc. But it has helped in a way with the current situation, paying for the current
cash
situation.
flow basis.
On a cash
over
flow,
interim.
that is
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, great question, Councillor. Councillor Sears, then I'll come to.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Back to the health and safety public incidences. I suppose I'm interested in a risk assessment and some trigger points for changes in the way we're dealing with those. What are we waiting for to happen before there'll be some changes in terms of capacity or safety around staff, public-facing roles?
Righto.
Yeah, slightly different, slightly different scenarios going on. So the transport, where they are verbally on the phone, we have changed phone numbers. We have got set protocol with the CX team around escalation and use of names and full names, and whether you refer to first names. There's not a lot in terms of telephones other than blocking the cell phone, which actually, if you start blocking someone's cell phone for a MyWay call, that is actually their primary way that they're booking the MyWay in the first place. So there's pros and cons around escalating and de-escalating that behaviour. Just in relation to my other comment around, we're starting to get, we had 2 yesterday, aggressiveness at the front counter. It is likely we will be putting security on this place in the next sort of 24 hours or the first day after Easter. They are starting to worry us and our staff.
Thank you.
Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you, Chair. And this is probably a good segue into mental health and mental well-being in terms of the people in this building and out in the field. And in terms of your health and safety well-being reporting, how do we get a sense or an indication around the process offered, whether it's the same as a physical injury or incident, and that an action plan is also offered for those experiencing mental well-being difficulties within the organisation?
So I guess what we have instigated right from the cyclone time was to make sure that we've got EAP services which are well known to our staff. And in addition, and added to that, have been Wanda and Jonathan, who are freely accessible and have actually sort of set up office downstairs for the duration of that. So they're freely available. Anything over and above that is something that we're happy to actually sort of have one-on-one and follow up with other services. Yeah, so we're comfortable that we've covered that off. You want to?
Yeah, I'm just following on from that. I'm thinking obviously our next quarterly report, we'll be pulling in the cyclone in that as well. Yes. So I could actually ask the member of staff who makes commentary on that to make a bit more around staff wellness and address those things. So you've got a bit more assurance about what wraparound services, if that would be helpful.
I think it'd be really helpful in for the, I suppose, the services provided, just acknowledging that, because it's really important right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Any other questions? Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. So, broader question about benchmarking. Probably I'm thinking about external benchmarking. This report is very good at comparing sort of quarter to quarter, but doesn't give us any external sense or test about how we look compared to the rest in our sector. So I just want to understand how that works. My impression is that it's more function by function, done as a separate job, but I'd like to hear an explanation of how that works and how we might be able to get to a more integrated external benchmarking for our performance.
I know that in the past there have been councils have been part of a group where they have done benchmarking and agreed on indicators to report on and put themselves through a benchmarking exercise. That fell through probably about 10 years ago. I'm looking at Desiree to see if she's got any more. So I am part of a national group of performance reports, who do it across councils as well, and there isn't anything, but we do get together quite a lot to discuss our indicators. Very interesting group, but no, they are actually a very interesting group.
Each organisation, correct me if I'm wrong, does in setting the long-term plan have their own levels of service. So comparative levels of service where they exist can be compared, but we have our own, so we don't necessarily have geographical New Zealand-wide comparatives. So it possibly could be done if other regions did have them, but it's not something that.
If I can, in a previous life when I was a consultant, I did do a benchmarking exercise. Oh no, it might have been when I was at Waikato Regional Council. We did, we look across the sector and look, and what we quickly found is, Susie said, is that very hard to compare apples with apples because they're slightly different. But what we tried to do was to avoid where we could. No, if we couldn't bring consistency, it would be to avoid inconsistency. So we could bring like measures together and see. What Sarah referenced earlier was a group that was involved in the Baldridge, business excellence criteria, and they are predominantly internal measures, things like turnover, where you can agree how you do it. I don't think they were ever externally reported, but they were used to drive business improvement internally. But that, we have always hoped to be able to benchmark some of those internal metrics. So that is something we could pick up and look at further.
Thank you, team. If I can just draw on a couple of those comments. This is a very detailed report. There's a couple of red flags in there that I think we need to address. One of them is around staff, and specifically staff turnover, and if I can come to that in a moment, I will. The other one is around Lagoima, and so there was a couple of situations where we didn't meet the deadline for that. So I think as a matter of, we would be not doing our jobs if we didn't inquire about that and whether those have been resolved. So I've got two questions. One is around those the Lagoima and what happened after. So presumably we did actually deliver, and there's probably some reason. It can't be a cyclone reason because this is only till December why we failed to meet the deadline. So that's one question. The other question is around staffing and indicators for governance around how we're going with that. And at the moment, it seems largely we only have the turnover rates. These particular ones are historical, don't reflect cycling, but we are getting really strong signals, particularly around the CX team and the stresses that they're under. And so we know the whole organisation has been under huge stress. So that, we can't not address this, the red flags in here about that, even pre-cyclone. So I would be doing disservice to staff if we didn't discuss that and whether we're doing everything that we can be doing as a governance team around that, including the information that we receive to help us understand how the organisation is faring from an HR point of view. Sorry to make it a long question. Two questions. What was it? One's around Lagoima and another one about. Do you want to?
I think the Lagoimas, Leanne, correct me if I'm wrong, were both mine.
There were a substantial amount of information requested by solicitors, the two that we failed to meet the deadlines, and they're quite hard to turn around in that period.
Sorry, and through you, Chair, are the level of service measure that we've got is that the response is the information is provided within 20 working days, which is different than the legislative requirement that a response is with the requester within 20 working days. It's a slight difference, but for instance, if you were going to say, yes, we're going to provide the information, but it'll be a few days before we get it to you. Yep. So we need to do that as soon as practicable, and these are instances where we weren't able to do that within the 20 working days.
I can confirm that they were sent
Yes.
And have been completed, but they did require a significant amount of review. They couldn't be emailed, they had to be put on specific USB sticks because of the amount of content that was required, and took significantly longer than 2 weeks to actually pull together.
Thank you. So just to recap, my second question was around, and then framed in terms of red flags, a red flag around turnover, staff turnover and the pressures on staff even pre-cyclone event, and metrics or ways that we can understand that through this reporting or otherwise as governors, because we know now the pressures are much bigger on staff than they were.
Through you, sorry, Chair, if it's okay, can I just go back very quickly to that Lagoima point? I do assume that will be read for the rest of the year, just to forewarn you, but that is a space where we are getting increasing activity, increasing breadth of request of where it is very complicated to rein them in. So we are looking at resourcing specifically for that going forward with some legal assistance as well, just FYI on that one. And I'll hand to you for turnover.
So in the turnover, the attrition rate, I can't tell you what the attrition rate is currently at the moment, but that is something that comes in front of our executive team. It's discussed each week on Mondays, and particularly in terms of the replacement positions that are funded. And so we do that. For new positions, that also comes in front of the executive team for consideration as part of the whole funding and budgeting around that. So that's the way that we monitor and manage that at the moment. If you're looking for a particular report to come up to governors, then we can certainly take that into consideration.
Chair, I'm wondering if I could assist Councillor Harding.
Please do.
Because this is a green flag as I see it in context. If you'd seen one of these a year ago, Councillor Harding, you would have been waving red flags all over the room through what James used to describe as the Great Resignation, where we were just, the attrition rate was enormous in percentage terms, and it was net negative out the door rather than in, and we were competing with private sector and central government all over the place in an environment of quite significant underemployment, but overemployment. You know, when there's not enough people to do the work. And we did adopt, in response to that, a people and capability strategy before the last triennium ended, which was directed at a number of levels of recruitment, looking, at our current staff, job satisfaction, and defining their own futures within the organisation, and recruitment strategies going right down to high school. And staff that have left as well. So this was a red flag a year ago, big time. And the funny thing is I read that and thought, phew, that's a lot better than I've seen it for a while. So that may be of some assurance to you, I'm not sure. But it's a good question, but I just wanted to give you a bit of context.
Kerry, and then come back.
And just to add to that, certainly one of the learnings from Canterbury and other disaster-struck areas was about the need to actually sort of monitor but heavily invest in terms of wellbeing, which goes back to Councillor Ormsby's earlier point around the wellbeing and making sure we've got the right support structures in place for our staff. And one of those learnings was you lose people in your organisation in the breach of it all, but in particular in the year, 18 months that follows that. So that's something that we're monitoring and paying special attention, particularly in terms of welfare and wellbeing support.
Councillor McIntosh.
Do we do exit interviews with all staff who leave? So to provide some qualitative information around the numbers, just a bit more detail on that would be helpful. You've noted here that exit interviews indicate staff are predominantly leaving for career progression and development. So just a bit more detail about those in subsequent reports would, I think, answer some of your questions, Councillor Harding.
Would you mind thinking about reporting back to council? I wonder if we could add some notes into the paper that accompanies us to council, some commentary on the points raised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Historical context might help.
I think, yeah, and it is declining. So just to be clear, the resignations are declining. So
We might get Luana to speak to that.
Liana, yeah.
Just observe that that's comforting to hear. However, that the CX team would seem, because they're temporary or they're contract workers, they're actually excluded. That whole turnover is actually excluded from the figures.
No, so the CX resignations will be in that quarter. So that was over a period of time, the customer experience. Yeah.
So that's not what be picky, but the report says that temporary staff are excluded from those stats. So that says, so on the face of it, I'm saying, well, look, we've got X percentage permanent staff turnover, but we know we've got pressure points, and particularly, we're hearing about the pressure that team is under, which is only going to get bigger. We're actually not seeing that because it's actually specifically excluded from the stats at the moment, so the report says.
I'm not sure, no, they're not temporary staff, they're full-time. Yeah. So they will.
Again, that's the report.
Yeah, 100%, yeah, so.
About them not all being permanent staff.
Right.
And for actually us to be recruiting from what I'd say is recruiting agent temping, that we're actually putting, I read the report as we're actually getting temping staff having to come in, as well as secondments from within the organisation to staff CX because of the rate of turnover and the pressure that's in there. And just simply observing that to the extent that those are, we're using temping agencies to fill, which is what the report says, which says to me, we're not actually seeing that data because they're specifically excluded from the turnover. Anyway, so maybe we can have a report back on, or that can be clarified next time around. But in the meantime, I'd hope in kind of glossing over that, we're not missing a trick and an opportunity to actually, as governors, help in some way. All right.
I've got a little couple of questions on the actually relating to the financials and not having line of sight on a more detailed financial statement makes it difficult. But I'm looking at the governance and partnerships section, just by way of example, and I'm seeing, as Councillor Williams pointed out, a sea of red, which could be a sea of black. The operating expenditure, for example, for community representation, 350 underspent. Tangata Whenua, 169 underspent. Regional development, overspent 400. And community sustainability, 550. So that's a net underspend of 600K. But then when I look at the financial paper seen earlier, we've got governance and partnership over by 141%. And I'm assuming that that's the loan repayments.
No, so remember when Chris opened earlier, he said the difference between this paper and the actual financials was what you're seeing here in this one doesn't include the overheads and the depreciation in that. So it's the overhead allocation. It doesn't include that. So this what you're seeing here is only costs attributable to that budget that they can control. Does that make sense?
Sort of, because there's a commentary further back around the phasing of loan repayments for sustainable homes, and I'm wondering, how does that get into governance and partnerships?
I can answer that one. So when we did the long-term plan, we had an activity under governance and partnerships, which was community sustainability, and it's bits and bobs that we've put together because they all contribute to community sustainability. So there's incentives, there's education, it has EnviroSkills, it has the climate action work of PIPA, that PIPA leads. So it is odds and bods that have been put together.
Would it be possible to include against the level of service? Is there a level of service for that? For those odds and sods?
Yeah.
But it doesn't appear in here, does it really?
They are, I think the levels of service are sorted by a group of activity, so you should
come under here.
Yeah. What page is that, Sarah?
Sustainable homes, it's either page 13, 14 or 15. Here we go, yes, page 15. Number of properties utilising sustainable homes programme, including Heat Smart this year.
Sure.
So we have the number of applications down 25%.
So should that appear, though, in that section where you've got every other governance and partnership?
Yeah, the summary, I guess, is it pulls up a number, there's a tricky one, isn't it?
So there's two sections, one section on level of service and one section which is financial and non-financial by activity. They are related, you're right, we could combine them. We've just put all the level of 58 together and then activity.
Fair enough.
But they are related.
And finally, just one last question, and it's to do with the vehicle numbers, 152 total vehicle fleet. A small number of hybrids and electrics. You're saying there was a vehicle review. Is it possible to bring some commentary on that review back to council next time?
Yeah, sure, so that review has gone through the executive leadership team, and we are just working through recommendations around what's possible for that. You can appreciate, obviously, our aim is to go all EV, but I'll take that back. We want to ensure that we can achieve sustainable goals by using electric vehicles where possible, but in some instances it's not possible. So we're just trying to work out the optimal blends, as well as how can we use pool cars instead of individual cars, how can we create a pool? So there's quite a bit on that, but happy to bring it to council when that's ready.
Thank you for that. The obvious question is for 152 vehicles for 300
Yep,
staff. So,
correct. Correct.
At its optics is not so flash. But so do you want to bring that back next time, or is it too soon for that?
To corporate and strategic?
No, to council.
Can I come back to you on a date for that?
We can kick the dates further down the track.
Could I just add in on that 152 fleet vehicles, it does include things like trailers as well. So there are lots of other things in that,
So people
motorbikes
going
as
around
well.
and carrying in
Actually,
trailers.
that's a good example of what's in behind the Power BI dashboard, because it's got a little bit more information about the numbers of ATVs and things that are classed as vehicles, but are not utes and cars. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the organisation report? No? Got a move for that? Thank you, Councillor Sears. Councillor Harding, a second. Any commentary on that from either of you?
No, thank you.
No? Any other comments from anyone? We're good to go. So in terms of the recommendation, we'll receive the report. What do we say? Yeah, just receiving and noting the report. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Those against will say no. That's carried. So thank you so much for that. And Hariza, I see your name here now. Hariza.
Like Horizon.
Hariza. Thank you. We're up to the audit report.
It's probably more on finance, but I'll stay here for.
Will you?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, Susie, are you okay to?
I'll get
It's the audit plan for the annual report 22-23.
Take us through that. Pretty straightforward stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, my laptop has just turned off. Sorry, so to be fair, not too much in this outside of what's on the paper. I guess the key here is for the upcoming annual audit or annual report needs to be adopted by the 31st of October. And what this is demonstrating is in point 6, just general timelines in which we will achieve the sign-off of that report. So this includes, as you will recall, the audit by EY, which needs to occur on that report, but we've factored in the timeline of that, and this will go through the Corporate and Strategic Committee on the 20th of September. So this is just making the council aware of the proposed future timeline and just what's going to happen. So happy to answer any questions, but I see this as just formality of dates, etc.
Thank you. Any questions on the process for generating the annual report? Pretty straightforward. I'll move that we receive the report. I've got a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Harding. No comment from me, none from you. Any other comment? So all those in favour of receiving a note in the report will say aye.
Aye.
Those again will say no. That's carried. So we're up to making great progress here. We've got one minor item, Councillor Williams, investment partnership.
Yes, well, look, it's just, I guess I'm bouncing off the reference to an investment strategy review in the paper that Susie mentioned earlier, and it is with great sadness, I think, that we all observed that Takitimu Seafoods is closed today. We're aware that Ngāti Kahungunu is looking at focusing on investments that increase the mana and the net financial position, health and resilience of its communities. And I just look forward, I guess, to opportunities for HBRIC to partner in investments with all our PSGs, including Ngāti Kahungunu, for the benefit of the resilience of this region and our balance sheet and our future cash flows. So I just really wanted to put that on the table as, we'll stand alongside Ngāti Kahungunu in that aspiration for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. All points were well made. No other matters? No, we're all good. Can I call upon Thompson to close for us?
Ka pai kia ora tātou, me ngā tuahuatanga kua putake nei, mai ka tia me whakakapi tātou mā tētahi karakia e whakarite ai ngā huarahi kei mui a tātou, nā hoki atu koe ki te kāinga, kia hau maru ai tō hoki ngā atu ki te kāinga. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa.
Kia tātou ariki, i ukarati. Kia ora tātou o te atu.
Me te whiwhina tātanga ki te wairu. Ake. Amen.
The meeting's closed. That was one of the quick ones.
Wow.